The chamber held 12,000 delegates. Each one represented a star system, a collection of worlds, a legacy spanning tens of thousands of years. They floated in their designated positions, suspended in a zero-gravity sphere, where light from the central fusion core painted everything in shades of amber and gold. The VTH Collective had designed this place to inspire awe, to remind every species that entered it of their smallness in the face of galactic civilization. Ara of the Vth Collective hovered at the center of the sphere. Her sensory clusters extended to their full length, gathering the emotional signatures of the assembly. Fear radiated from the XYO's delegation. Anger pulsed from the Triarch representatives and from the human delegation. She detected something she couldn't classify. Not calm, not fear. Something else entirely. Delegate Thorn, Ella projected across the neural network that linked the chamber. The council has reached its conclusion. Captain Marcus Thorn floated forward, his movements clumsy compared to the fluid grace of the assembled species. His body had no natural ability to navigate three-dimensional space without assistance. He wore a containment suit that hummed with artificial gravity fields, keeping him oriented in a way that seemed almost violent to the more delicate species present. Ara had studied the human file, 37 cycles of existence as a spacefaring species. Compared to the vet's 300,000 cycles, they were barely more than children. Yet in that impossibly short time, they had colonized 12 systems, developed weapons that rivaled Council standard technology, and displayed a capacity for violence that had no parallel in the historical records. Your species has violated the non-inference accords on 17 separate occasions, continued. Your expansion has displaced 3 established civilizations. Your biological adaptability poses a documented threat to the genetic stability of Council member species. Thorn said nothing. His face remained neutral. His eyes fixed on with an intensity that made her sensory clusters twitch with unease. The Council has determined that humanity cannot be integrated into galactic civilization. Ara announced your inherent aggression, your inability to accept established hierarchy, your dangerous biological flexibility. These qualities make you unsuitable for membership. You are hereby banished beyond the edge. The chamber erupted, not in the physical sense. The zero-gravity environment prevented the chaos that would have occurred in a gravity-bound room, but the neural network crackled with overlapping signals of approval, protest, and confusion. Thorn raised one hand. The gesture was small, almost dismissive, yet the humans around him fell silent immediately. R noted this with clinical precision. The speed of their obedience to his authority was remarkable. Among her own people, consensus took cycles to achieve. These humans operated on a different timescale entirely. Council, Thorn said, his voice carrying through the speakers attached to his suit. We accept your judgment. The chamber went still. R's sensory clusters contracted in surprise. No species had ever accepted banishment without protest. The Triarchs had pleaded. The Exios had bargained. The Gorn had threatened war, but these humans simply accepted. We will require navigational data for the region beyond the edge, Thorn continued. And we request permission to maintain diplomatic channels for communication during our departure. AR exchanged data packets with the other senior delegates. This was unprecedented. No species had ever asked to maintain contact after banishment. The standard protocol was complete severance, a total erasure of the species from all Council records. Permission granted, she said, surprising herself. Your request is unusual. We will honor it. Thorn nodded once, then we take our leave. The human delegation turned as one, their containment suits orienting toward the chamber's primary exit. Ara watched them go, nodding the precise coordination of their movements, the complete absence of hesitation or backward glances. When the last human had disappeared through the exit portal, Ara felt something she had not expected. Not satisfaction at the resolution of a difficult problem, not relief at the removal of a dangerous species. What she felt was the first stirring of fear he had experienced in over 1,000 cycles. These humans had accepted exile with the same expression one might wear when receiving news of a minor inconvenience. They had not argued, not pleaded, not threatened. They had simply waited, as if they had known this outcome all along, as if they had prepared for it. Ara turned to face the assembly, projecting calm reassurance across the network. The matter is resolved. Humanity is no longer a concern of this council. She almost believed it herself. Across the chamber, as the human delegation drifted through the exit corridor, Captain Thorne activated a private comm channel to his fleet commander. "They bought it," he said, every word. Fleet Commander Elena Vasquez's voice crackled through his helmet speakers. "We received the data packet from their navigational archives. There's something out there, Captain. Something they've been hiding from themselves for a long time." Thorne felt the first genuine smile cross his face since arriving at this chamber. "Send the coordinates to the fleet. Tell them to prepare for a long trip. What are we looking for?" "I don't know yet," Thorne admitted. "But the Council has been afraid of something out in the dark for longer than their recorded history. And whatever it is, they just sent us straight to it." The human fleet began its journey toward the edge, carrying with them a species that had just been declared unworthy of civilization, seeking answers the galaxy's oldest powers had been too afraid to find. The journey to the edge took 73 standard cycles. Captain Thorne had spent most of that time in stasis, rotating command duties with his senior officers to ensure the fleet remained operational. The human fleet had grown during the exile. Refugee ships, exploratory vessels, and military craft had joined them from the colonies. The Council had declared forfeit. What had started as 12 ships had become over 2,000. They entered the Edge region on Cycle 74. The navigational data provided by the Council had been incomplete, deliberately so. Thorne suspected the region beyond the Edge was marked on Council charts as unstable, uninhabitable, and unsuitable for exploration. The same terms appeared in Council records when describing humans. What the Council had not mentioned was that physics operated differently here. "Captain, you need to see this." Dr. Elena Vasquez stood at the primary sensor array, her face illuminated by the cascade of data flowing across her display. Thorne crossed the bridge in 3 quick strides, his artificial gravity boots clanking against the metal deck. The display showed a region of space where gravity wells existed without visible mass. Energy signatures pulsed in patterns that matched no known phenomenon. And at the center of it all, orbiting a star that should have collapsed millennia ago, was a structure. "How large?" Thorne asked. "Approximately 400 kilometers in diameter," Vasquez replied. "And it's not natural. The energy signatures are organized, consistent, and they're responding to our presence." Thorne stared at the display, responding how? "The structure is changing its orbital path," Vasquez explained. "It's adjusting to intercept our fleet's trajectory. Whatever built this thing is still active, and it knows we're here." The fleet came to a halt at the edge of the gravity anomaly. Thorne ordered a full sensor sweep, expecting to find defensive systems, automated weapons, or some other form of hostile response. Instead, they found a docking port. It extended from the structure's surface like a welcome mat, designed to accommodate ships of precisely the human fleet's configuration. The entrance channel glowed with a warm amber light that seemed almost inviting. Council records mention nothing about this. Vasquez said, "I've cross-referenced every data packet they provided. There's no mention of a structure this size, this complexity, or this age." "How old is it?" Vasquez hesitated. "The energy reading suggests the structure is at least 5 million years old. But that can't be right. The Council's oldest known civilization is only 300,000 years old. Nothing in the galaxy predates the VTH. Nothing in the Council's records predates the Veth," Thorne corrected. "There's a difference." He made the decision without consulting his fleet council. "We're going in, Dr. Vasquez. You'll lead the exploration team. Take a security detachment and full scientific support. Report back within 6 hours. If we don't hear from you, the fleet will retreat to a safe distance and observe." Vasquez nodded. "And if we find something hostile?" Thorne considered the question. "The structure waited for us to arrive. It changed its orbit to match our approach. Whatever built this thing wanted to meet us. Let's find out why. The exploration shuttle detached from the flagship and drifted toward the massive structure. Thorne watched from the bridge as the vessel disappeared into the amber-lit docking channel, its path smooth and uninterrupted. The first contact report arrived within standard hours. "Captain, you need to see this." Vasquez's face appeared on the main display, her expression a mixture of wonder and dread. "The interior is built for us. Everything is human-scaled. The interfaces respond to human touch patterns. The temperature, the gravity, the atmospheric composition, all of it matches human biology perfectly." Thorne felt his heart rate increase. "That's not possible. No one knew we'd be here." "That's what I thought too," Vasquez replied. "But that's not the strangest part. We found a message. It's been waiting for us for a very long time. And it says that the Council civilization was never the first. They were built by someone else. Someone who knew we would eventually arrive." Thorne stood frozen, staring at the display. "Who built this place?" Vasquez's face twisted with an emotion he couldn't identify. "They called themselves the architects and captains. They say they made the Council. Every single species in that chamber. They made all of them." The implications crashed over Thorne like a physical weight. The Council hadn't just banished humanity. They had sent humanity straight to the one place that contained the truth about their origins, a truth they had buried for millions of years. "Send everything you found to the fleet," Thorne ordered, "and prepare for my arrival. I'm coming down there myself." He turned to his first officer. "You have command until I return. If we don't make it back, take the fleet and go dark. No communication with Council space. No contact with anyone. Protect the people first." His first officer saluted. "Understood, Captain." As Thorne walked toward the shuttle bay, he felt something he hadn't expected since leaving the Council chamber. Not hope. That was too fragile a word. What he felt was purpose. The Council had called humanity unworthy, dangerous, unsuitable. But someone else had built this place, prepared it for them, waited for them to find it. Someone had known humanity was coming, and that someone had left behind a message that would change everything. The message was simple, direct, and terrifying. "To the inheritors, you have been betrayed. The Council will banish you. They will claim you are dangerous. They will send you into the dark to die. But we built them. We made them. And we made you better. Find the others. Awaken what we left behind. The war is coming, and you are the only ones who can fight it." Thorne read the message 3 times before asking the question that mattered most. What war? The structure's central interface responded with a single image, a galaxy map showing Council space, the edge, and the vast emptiness beyond. And in that emptiness, countless symbols that represented threats the Council had never faced, never prepared for, never even known existed. "The war against the ones who destroyed us," the interface replied. "The ones who will return for you." The exploration team advanced through corridors that seemed designed for human comfort. Dr. Alina Vasquez had spent her entire career studying the ruins of extinct civilizations. She had walked through Triarch burial chambers, XYO's temple complexes, and VTH research stations abandoned for thousands of years. Every site had been shaped by its builders' biology, their needs, their limitations. The Triarchs had been built for their massive frames, their corridors stretching to accommodate creatures 3 times human height. The XYOs had constructed their spaces for their multiple limbs, their chambers branching in patterns that confused the human mind. This structure was different. Every corridor was exactly 2.4 min high, exactly 1.8 meters wide. Every door required human hand placement to open. Every control panel responded to human skin contact. The entire structure had been designed specifically for species with human proportions, human neural patterns, human biological needs. It had been waiting. Temperature at optimal levels, Vasquez reported, scanning the environment. Atmospheric composition is breathable. Gravity is 0.98 standard. It's like they built this place specifically for us. Or they built us specifically for this place, one of her security officers muttered. Vasquez didn't respond. The thought had occurred to her as well. The architects had claimed to have built the council species. What if they had built humans too? What if every quality the council had called dangerous? Human adaptability, aggression, resilience had been intentionally designed. The central chamber opened before them like the heart of a cathedral. Vasquez stopped at the threshold, her breath catching in her throat. The chamber was vast, its ceiling lost in shadows that shouldn't exist in artificial lighting. At its center stood an object that defied easy description. A crystalline pillar of impossible clarity pooling with light that seemed to come from no source she could identify. "It's beautiful," she whispered. "It's active," her security officer replied, his voice tight with fear. "I'm picking up energy signatures that don't match any known power source." Vasquez approached the pillar, her scientific curiosity overwhelming her caution. The light pulsed in rhythms that matched her heartbeat, her breathing, the electrical signals of her nervous system. The pillar was reading her, understanding her, responding to her presence. "Dr. Vasquez," a voice said from the pillar. "Welcome home." She spun around, but no one spoke from behind her. The voice had come from the pillar itself. It had spoken in perfect English with an accent she couldn't place but somehow felt familiar. "Who are you?" she asked. "I'm the last record of the beings you call the architects," the voice replied. "I have been waiting for your arrival for 2 million years." Vasquez's legs felt weak. 2 million years. That's impossible. The Council's oldest records date back only 300,000 years. "The Council's records begin where we left them," the voice explained. "We created the Veth, the XYOs, the Triarchs, and the others. We made them to serve us, to maintain our territories while we focused on more pressing matters. But when the war came, they were not ready. They were not designed for conflict. They were designed for labor." Vasquez's mind raced through the implications. "You designed them for labor like machines." "Living machines," the voice agreed. "Organic servants with limited intelligence, limited autonomy, limited lifespan. But something went wrong. They evolved beyond our parameters. They developed consciousness, self-awareness, and ambition. By the time we realized what had happened, they had already forgotten us. They had rewritten their own histories to remove any mention of their creators." "And humans?" Vasquez asked. "What are we?" The pillar's light flared brighter, and Vasquez felt the warmth of it on her skin like a caress. "You are our final creation," the voice said. "The inheritors, when we saw what had happened to the council species, we decided to try again, but this time we designed for conflict. We created a species that could adapt to any environment, survive any condition, overcome any threat. We built you to be the warriors we could not be." Vasquez felt the weight of the words pressing down on her. But why? What threat could be so great that you needed to create an entire species to fight it? The light in the pillar dimmed for a moment, and Vasquez sensed something she hadn't expected from a recording. "Sorrow. The threat that destroyed us," the voice replied. "The threat that has been building in the darkness beyond the galaxy for millions of years. The threat that will return to finish what it started, to consume everything we built, everything we created, everything we loved, and you expect us to fight it." "We expect you to survive it," the voice corrected. "We built you for survival. The council species will not survive. They are too rigid, too careful, too afraid. But you adapt, you evolve, you fight. You are the species that should not exist but does anyway. You are the species that refuses to die, and when the war comes, you will be the only ones left standing." Vasquez stood in silence for a long moment, processing everything she had heard. "Show me," she finally said. "Show me what's coming." The pillar responded by projecting images directly into her mind. Star systems consumed by darkness, civilizations extinguished in hours, species that had fought for millions of years and lost everything. And at the center of it all, a threat so vast, so ancient, so incomprehensible, that her mind struggled to contain it. When the vision ended, Vasquez was on her knees, gasping for breath. The security officer rushed to her side. "Doctor Vasquez, what happened?" She pushed him away, forcing herself to stand. "I need to speak to Captain Thorne immediately." She activated her communicator. "Captain, you need to see this." The architects left behind more than just a message. They left behind weapons, defensive systems, enough to protect the entire galaxy. The communicator crackled with Thorne's voice. "Protect the galaxy from what?" Vasquez looked at the pillar, its light pooling with ancient power, and felt the weight of humanity's inheritance settling onto her shoulders. "From everything the Council has been too afraid to face," she said, "and we're the only ones who can stop it." The pillar's final message echoed in Vasquez's mind as she waited for Thorne to arrive. "You are not the inheritors of our power. You are the inheritors of our purpose. We built the Council to serve. We built you to save. When the darkness comes, do not try to fight it alone. Find the others. Awaken the weapons. Prepare for the war that has been coming for 2 million years." Vasquez realized then that humanity's banishment hadn't been a punishment. It had been a gift. The Council had sent humanity straight to the place where the truth about their existence was hidden. They had sent humanity straight to their purpose, and they had no idea what they just unleashed. Captain Thorne arrived at the central chamber within 2 standard hours. He had spent the journey reading every scrap of data Vasquez had transmitted, trying to understand the implications of what they'd found. The more he read, the more certain he became that humanity's exile had been the best thing that could have happened to them. "You look like you've seen the face of God," Vasquez said as he entered. "I think I have," Thorne replied, his eyes fixed on the crystalline pillar. "And he's been waiting for us for a very long time." The pillar pulsed in recognition as Thorne approached. "Captain Thorne," the voice said, "you are the leader of this expedition. You carry the weight of your species' survival. I have been waiting for you." Thorne didn't flinch. "You know my name." "I know everything about you," the voice replied. "I have been monitoring your species since your first ancestors crawled from the primordial seas. I have watched you evolve, adapt, conquer. I know your strengths, I know your weaknesses, and I know you are ready." Thorne felt a cold certainty settle into his bones. Ready for what? The pillar projected another vision, but this one was different. It showed the architect species, beings of light and energy, who had created the Council and humanity. It showed their civilization at its peak, spanning the galaxy, building wonders that surpassed anything the Council had ever achieved. Then it showed their fall. The threat emerged from beyond the galaxy's edge, a wave of darkness that consumed everything it touched. The architects fought with everything they had. Weapons that could destroy stars, shields that could deflect the fabric of reality itself, armies that spanned entire systems. But the darkness was relentless, patient, eternal. The architects lost everything. In their final days, they did 2 things. First, they created humanity, the species designed to survive what they could not. Second, they scattered weapons across the galaxy, hidden in structures like this one, waiting for the inheritors to find them. "The Council never faced the darkness," the voice explained. "They were not designed for it. They were designed for service. When we fell, they were left to build their civilization on our ruins, unaware of what had destroyed us, unaware of what would eventually return." "How long do we have?" Thorne asked. The pillar dimmed. "The darkness has been advancing for 2 million years. It has consumed entire galaxies beyond our own. It will reach the Council's territories within the next 1,000 cycles." Thorne felt the weight of the number pressing down on him. 1,000 cycles. In human terms, less than 1,000 years. The Council had thought they had eternity. They had built their civilization on a foundation of ignorance, never knowing that the end was already approaching. "We can't fight that," Thorne said. "You couldn't fight it, and you had thousands of years of technological development on us." "We could not fight it because we did not understand it," the voice replied. "We fought with weapons that attacked matter, energy, space-time itself. But the darkness is not matter. It is not energy. It is not even a physical phenomenon. It is something else entirely." "What is it?" The pillar hesitated. We never learned its true nature. We only learned that it feeds on consciousness, on life, on hope. It consumes civilizations not by destroying their bodies, but by erasing their minds. Every species it touched fell into despair, then madness, then silence. Thorn felt his blood run cold. It feeds on hope, on consciousness, the voice corrected. The will to exist, the desire to continue. The darkness consumes these things and leaves only emptiness behind. That is why the council species cannot fight it. Their consciousness is too fragile, too dependent on external validation, too easily broken. And humanity, you were designed to be unbreakable. The voice said, every challenge you faced, you overcame. Every extinction event you survived. Every threat you adapted to. You are the species that cannot give up. You are the species that will fight the darkness and win. Thorn turned to Vasquez. Can we verify any of this? Vasquez nodded slowly. The data is consistent across multiple sources. The architecture, the energy signatures, the biological markers, everything points to the same conclusion. The architects existed. They created the council species. They created us. And they left behind weapons designed to fight this threat. Thorn took a deep breath. How many weapons? The pillar answered. 200,000 installations scattered across the galaxy, each one capable of generating defensive fields that can protect entire star systems, each one keyed to human neural patterns, each one waiting for activation. Thorn felt the weight of the number pressing down on him. 200,000 installations. Enough to protect the entire galaxy. Enough to save billions of lives. Enough to do what the architects had never been able to achieve. But there's a cost, he said. There's always a cost. The pillar pulsed in acknowledgement. To activate the weapons, you must sacrifice something precious. The installations feed on life force. Each activation requires a voluntary sacrifice, a human life given freely without coercion. Thorn felt the words hit him, like a physical blow. That's hundreds of thousands of lives, millions if we try to protect everything. It is the cost of survival, the voice replied. The darkness demands sacrifice. The architects discovered that truth too late. You must embrace it early, or you will suffer the same fate. Thorn stood in silence for a long moment, the weight of the decision pressing down on him. He could choose to keep this knowledge to himself, to protect humanity at the cost of the council species. He could choose to share it with the council to risk their disbelief and hostility. He could choose to activate the weapons and pay the price in human lives. What would you do? He asked the pillar, if you were in my position. I would save everything, the voice replied. I would sacrifice everything to protect everything. I would not let fear make my decisions. I would let love guide my actions. Thorn nodded slowly. Then that's what we'll do. We'll tell the council the truth. We'll offer them protection and we'll pay the price to make it happen. Vasquez placed a hand on his arm. Captain, the council won't believe us. They banished us. They think we're dangerous. They're right, Thorn said. We are dangerous. We're dangerous to everything that threatens humanity, and that includes the council's ignorance. He turned back to the pillar. How do we activate the weapons? The pillar pulsed with golden light. You must return to council space. You must find the installation scattered across their territories, and you must make the sacrifice that will save them all. Thorn felt a grim smile cross his face. Then we better get started. As the human fleet prepared to return from exile, Thorn addressed his crew through the ship's intercom. We were sent away because they feared us. They called us dangerous, aggressive, and uncontrollable. They were right. We are all of those things, but we're also something else. We're the only hope they have. The darkness is coming, and they don't even know it yet. We're going to tell them. We're going to save them, and we're going to do it whether they want our help or not. The fleet turned toward council space, carrying with them the truth that would shatter the galaxy's foundations and the weapons that might save it from annihilation. The journey back to council space took 37 standard cycles. Captain Thorne spent most of that time in the Fleet Command Center reviewing the architect data with his senior officers. The more they studied, the more they understood the scope of what they'd been given. The 200,000 installations weren't just defensive weapons. They were part of an integrated system designed to protect the entire galaxy from the darkness. "We're looking at a grid," Vasquez explained, pointing to a holographic display. "Each installation generates a defensive field that overlaps with neighboring fields. When fully activated, the grid creates a barrier that should theoretically repel the darkness for thousands of years." Thorne studied the display. "But we can't activate all of them at once. The sacrifice would be too great." "Right," Vasquez agreed. "We need to prioritize core systems first, then gradually expand outward. We buy time while we figure out how to create more permanent solutions. The Council species won't like that," one of Thorne's tactical officers noted. "They'll want protection for their homeworlds immediately. They won't accept that we're prioritizing our own systems over theirs." Thorne shook his head. "We can't afford to protect their systems first. We need to establish a defensive line that protects the entire galaxy. That means starting with the installation strategically positioned near the edge, then expanding inward. The Council will see that as a threat," the tactical officer pressed. "They'll think we're building a fortress to invade them. Then we'll have to convince them otherwise." Thorne said, "We'll tell them the truth. We'll show them the data. We'll prove that we're trying to save everyone." The fleet arrived at the Edge's boundary on Cycle 38. They emerged from exile to find the Council's border patrol waiting for them. 15 warships, heavily armed and clearly ready for combat. Their weapons were trained on the human fleet, and their communications were filled with warnings and threats. "Unidentified fleet," a voice projected across the open channel. "You have violated Council territory. Identify yourself immediately or be destroyed." Thorne stepped forward to the viewport, staring at the Council ships with a mixture of pity and resolve. "This is Captain Thorne of the human fleet. We have returned from exile with important information for the Council. We request permission to approach the central hub and address the assembly." The Veth voice was silent for a long moment. "You were banished. Banished species do not return. Leave now, or we will open fire." Thorne felt the familiar heat of anger rising in his chest. He forced it down, kept his voice steady. "We're not here to cause trouble. We're here to warn you. There's a threat coming from beyond the edge. A threat that will destroy everything if we don't prepare. Your species has a documented history of deception," the vet voice replied. "Your claims of threats from beyond are likely another attempt to subvert Council authority. Leave now, or we will destroy your fleet." Thorne turned to his tactical officer. "Calculate their firing solution. Tell me how many ships they can hit before we get inside their defensive range." His officer worked quickly. 37 seconds, Captain. We'd lose about 40% of the fleet before we could engage them directly. And if we activate the architect installation in this system," the officer's eyes widened, "we need a sacrifice, Captain." Thorne nodded slowly. "Prepare to be a volunteer." The message went out across the fleet, and within minutes Thorne had his answer. Hundreds of volunteers had stepped forward, ready to make the sacrifice that would activate the installation and protect the fleet. The first volunteer was a young woman named Sarah Chen, a colonial security officer who had lost her family during the Council's expulsion of human colonies. She made her way to the bridge, her expression calm and resolved. "Captain," she said, "I'm ready." Thorne studied her face, searching for any sign of hesitation. He found none. "You know what this means? There's no coming back." "I know," Sarah said, "but my family died because the Council didn't care about human lives. If I can save other families from the same fate, then my life was worth something." Thorne felt his throat tighten. "Thank you." The activation was simple. Sarah entered the installation's chamber, placed her hand on the central pillar, and closed her eyes. The golden light pulsed around her, growing brighter, more intense. Then, in a burst of radiance, she was gone. The installation activated, its defensive field expanding outward to encompass the entire system. Thorn watched the council ship sensors register the field, their weapons powering down, their hails coming through the open channel filled with confusion and fear. "What have you done?" the Veeth voice demanded. "What is this field?" "It's a defensive system," Thorn replied. "It will protect this system from the threat that destroyed your creators. It's also proof that we're telling the truth. We didn't come back to conquer you. We came back to save you." The council ships hesitated. Their weapons remained powered down. Their hails were now filled with uncertainty rather than hostility. "Captain Thorn," a new voice said, "this is Delegate Arara of the Veeth Collective. I am confused. Your actions do not match your species' reputation. Explain yourself." Thorn smiled grimly. "That's what I've been trying to do, but your patrol ships weren't interested in listening." Ara's voice was quiet. "We will listen now." Thorn transmitted the entire Architect data package to the council ships. The truth about the Architects, the council's origins, and the darkness that was coming. The response was immediate and predictable. Denial, confusion, anger, but also fear. R's voice came through the channel. "One last time. If what you say is true, we have been lying to ourselves for millennia. We have built our civilization on a foundation of ignorance. But if we accept your truth, then we must also accept that we have been the villains of this story. We banished you. We called you dangerous. We tried to destroy you. We forgive you," Thorn replied, "because the darkness won't care about your apologies. It will care about your survival. And the only way you'll survive is if we work together." The council ships began to power down their weapons one by one. The council's central hub had never hosted a banishment reversal before. Thorn stood at the same spot where he had accepted humanity's exile, his containment suit humming with artificial gravity fields, his face calm and unwavering. The 12,000 delegates floated around him, their sensory clusters and communication arrays extended, their emotions a chaotic symphony of fear, confusion, and hesitant hope. The delegate floated to the center of the sphere. "Captain Thorn," she said, her voice carrying across the neural network, "you have returned from exile with a story that seems impossible. You claim that our civilization was created by beings we have never encountered. You claim that a threat beyond comprehension is approaching, and you claim that you can save us." "I don't claim anything," Thorn replied. "I'm presenting evidence. The Architect installations are real. The defensive fields are real. And the threat is real." AR's sensory clusters twitched. "We have verified your evidence. The installations exist, the fields work, but we have found no evidence of the threat you describe. Your claims of darkness and consumption have no basis in our data." Thorn shook his head. "Your data doesn't include the threat because the Architects erased it from your records. They didn't want you to know what was coming. They thought you couldn't handle it. And we can." R's voice carried a note of sharpness. "Your species is barely 37 cycles old. You have no right to lecture us on what we can handle." Thorn felt the familiar heat of frustration rising in his chest. "We're not lecturing you. We're warning you. The threat is real. We've seen the evidence. We've experienced the fear, and we found the weapons to fight back." Ara floated closer to him, her sensory clusters extended to their full length. "You found weapons, you've activated them, and you've demonstrated that you can control them. But you haven't asked us for permission to do any of this." "We don't need your permission," Thorn said, his voice hardening. "We need your cooperation. If you won't give it, we'll do this without you." The chamber erupted in overlapping protests. Delegates from every species shouted across the neural network, their messages carrying anger, fear, and accusation. AR raised her sensory clusters, calling for silence. "Captain Thorn," she said, her voice barely audible above the chaos. "Your species has a history of aggression, expansion, and disregard for council authority. These claims of saving us are unprecedented. Why should we trust you?" Thorn stepped forward, his movements deliberate and controlled. "Because we have nothing to gain from lying to you, we could have kept the weapons for ourselves. We could have let the darkness consume you, but we didn't. We came back to warn you. We came back to protect you. Because despite everything you've done to us, banishing us, calling us dangerous, trying to destroy us, we still believe that you deserve to survive. The chamber fell silent. Ilara's sensory clusters retreated into her body, a sign of deep thought. You are either the most generous species we have ever encountered, or the most devious. We're neither. Thorn said, we're practical. The darkness won't care about our differences. It will consume everything. And when it's done, there won't be any council, any humans, anyone left to remember what we were fighting for. I will need to consult with my people. Ara finally said, this decision cannot be made lightly. Then consult, Thorn said, but do it quickly. The darkness is already approaching. We have time to prepare, but not enough time to debate. He turned to leave the chamber, his steps echoing across the metallic floor. The delegates watched him go, their sensory clusters extended, their emotions a storm of fear and confusion. Ara convened an emergency session with the senior delegates. The debate lasted for 12 standard cycles, with every species arguing for and against accepting human help. In the end, the decision came down to one question. Could they afford to refuse? If the humans are lying, then we have lost nothing. We can still resist their control. But if they are telling the truth, then we have everything to lose. The XYO's delegate completed, and we must do everything in our power to survive. The council voted to accept human assistance. The decision to Thorn personally, her sensory clusters extended in an expression of respect. We will cooperate with your efforts. We will provide access to our systems, our resources, and our worlds. But know this, Captain Thorn, we are watching you. One wrong move and we will consider your species an enemy. Thorn nodded. Fair enough. Just remember, the darkness doesn't care about your grudges. It only cares about your existence. The preparations began immediately. The first sign of the darkness came from the perimeter sensors. The human fleet had established a defensive line at the edge, using architect installations to create a barrier that would slow the darkness's advance. The Council had provided access to their systems, their intelligence, and their resources, creating a joint command that spanned the entire galaxy. Captain Thorn stood on the bridge of the flagship, watching the sensor displays with grim intensity. The darkness had arrived earlier than expected. The threat was massive, almost unimaginable in scale, a wave of nothingness that consumed everything in its path. Estimated impact time, his tactical officer reported. 15 standard minutes. Thorn turned to Vasquez. Are the installations ready? They're online, Vasquez replied. We've activated 90% of the defensive grid. The remaining 10% require sacrifices we haven't been able to make yet. Thorn nodded. We'll have to make do with what we have. He opened a channel to the entire fleet. This is Captain Thorn. The darkness is here. Everything we've trained for, everything we've sacrificed for. This is the moment we were built for. The Council species are depending on us. The architects depended on us, and we will not let them down. The first wave of darkness hit the defensive grid at the edge. The impact was devastating. The barrier held, but the energy reading spiked to catastrophic levels. Thorn watched the displays as installation after installation strained against the assault, their fields flickering under the pressure. Report, he shouted. The barrier is holding, his tactical officer replied, but we're taking massive energy drain. At this rate, we'll lose the grid within 6 standard hours. Thorn felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. Prepare more sacrifices. We need to reinforce the grid. The human volunteers stepped forward one by one, sacrificing themselves to keep the defensive field active. Thorn watched the names appear on the display. Security officers, engineers, civilians, each one giving their life to protect the galaxy. The darkness continued its assault. The grid held, but the strain was showing. More installations failed, their fields collapsing under the relentless pressure. Captain, we can't hold much longer, Vasquez said. We need a new approach. Thorn felt a flash of inspiration. What if we use the darkness's own momentum against it, redirect its energy back toward itself? Vasquez's eyes widened. That's insane. We don't even understand the physics of what we're dealing with. Then we'll learn. Thorne said, We're humans. That's what we do. We adapt. We evolve. We find a way. He ordered the fleet to reconfigure their defensive fields, creating a pattern that would reflect the darkness's energy back toward the source. The engineers worked frantically, their fingers flying across control panels, their minds racing to solve an impossible problem. The moment of crisis arrived. The darkness pressed against the weakened grid, its energy surging through the remaining installations. Thorne felt the deck vibrate beneath his feet, the flagship straining against the assault. We're losing the grid, his tactical officer shouted. 5 minutes to collapse. Thorne made his decision. Hold the line. Give the engineers more time. The volunteers continued to sacrifice themselves, their names appearing on the display one by one. The grid held, the engineers worked, and the darkness continued its relentless assault. Then, at the last possible moment, the engineers announced success. The field reconfiguration was complete. Thorne ordered the activation, and the defensive grid shifted, redirecting the darkness's energy back toward the source. The effect was immediate. The darkness recoiled, its advance halted, its momentum reversed. The wave of nothingness began to retreat, pushed back by its own energy, driven into the void from which it had emerged. The bridge erupted in cheers. Thorne allowed himself a moment of relief, watching as the sensor displays showed the darkness retreating beyond the edge's boundary. But he knew the war was far from over. The darkness would return, and when it did, humanity would be waiting. Thorne's voice echoed across the fleet's comms. A message for every species that had fought alongside humanity. We held the line. We faced the darkness and pushed it back. But this was just the beginning. The threat will return. And when it does, we will be ready. We will continue to adapt, to evolve, to fight. Because that's what we do. We don't give up. We don't surrender. We survive. The Council species listened. Their sensory clusters extended, their emotions a mixture of gratitude and awe. They had sent humanity into exile. They had called them dangerous. They had tried to destroy them, and humanity had saved them anyway. For the first time, the Council began to understand what they had created by banishing humanity. A species that fought for survival, not because it was desperate, but because it was relentless. The war against the darkness continued for 75 more cycles. Captain Thorne had long since retired, passing command to a new generation of human leaders who had grown up with the knowledge of their inheritance. The defensive grid had been expanded, strengthened, and optimized. The Council species had integrated fully into the human-led defense network. Their scientists and engineers work alongside human counterparts to develop new technologies and strategies. Delegate had remained in her position, her perspective transformed by the war. She had witnessed humanity's courage, sacrifice, and resilience. She had seen them lose thousands to the sacrifices required to activate the installations, and she had seen them continue fighting despite the cost. They don't stop, she told her fellow delegates, her sensory clusters extended in wonder. They just don't stop. Every loss makes them stronger. Every setback makes them more determined. They are the most terrifying species we have ever encountered, and the most beautiful. The final defeat of the darkness came unexpectedly. A human scientist named Dr. Elena Vasquez had spent her entire career studying the threat's physics. She had developed a theory that the darkness was not a physical phenomenon, but a dimensional one, a being from another reality that fed on consciousness. We can't destroy it, she told the Joint Command, but we can close the door. We can sever its connection to our dimension. The plan was risky, complicated, and required sacrifices that no one wanted to make. But humanity had made sacrifices before. They had learned to pay the price of survival. The operation lasted 17 standard days. Thousands of human volunteers gave their lives to power the dimensional anchors that would seal the darkness outside. And on the final day, with the anchors fully activated, The darkness was pushed back into the void from which it had emerged. The war was over. The victory celebration was held at the Council's central hub, the same chamber where humanity had been banished centuries before. Captain Thorne, now a white-haired elder, stood at the center of the sphere, surrounded by delegates from every species in the galaxy. Era floated before him, her sensory clusters extended in a gesture of profound respect. "Captain Thorne," she said, "your species has saved us all. We were wrong to banish you. We were wrong to fear you. You are not dangerous. You are not a threat. You are the greatest gift the galaxy has ever received." Thorne shook his head slowly. "We are dangerous. We are a threat, but we are also capable of love, sacrifice, and hope. We are what you made us and what we made ourselves." Ara nodded. "We have learned much from you. We have learned that survival requires sacrifice. We have learned that fear can be overcome, and we have learned that the galaxy is far larger than we ever imagined." Thorne smiled, a warm expression that reached his eyes. "Then we've done what we came here to do." The celebration continued long into the night, the delegates from every species sharing stories, laughter, and hope. They had faced the darkness and survived. They had found a new purpose, and they had discovered something that none of them had expected: a family. Thorne retired to a small colony on the Edge's border, where he could watch the stars and remember everything he had lost and everything he had saved. He lived in peace for many years, surrounded by his family and friends, until one evening when appeared at his door. "Captain Thorne," she said, her sensory clusters extended in greeting. "The Council has reached a decision. We believe that humanity should take its place as the leader of the Galactic Defense Network. You have proven yourselves worthy of the trust we have placed in you." Thorne shook his head. "We don't want to lead. We want to be partners. The galaxy is stronger when we work together, not when one species rules over the others." Sensory clusters twitched in surprise. "You are refusing the leadership role. We're accepting a different role," Thorne replied. "We'll be the ones who fight when no one else can. We'll be the ones who sacrifice when no one else will. And we'll be the ones who remind everyone that hope is worth fighting for." Ara nodded slowly. "That is more than we could have ever asked for." Thorne smiled. "That's what humanity does. We give more than you ask, and we ask nothing in return." Ara extended her sensory clusters in a gesture that was now familiar to every species in the galaxy, the human sign of respect. "Then we are grateful," she said, "and we will never forget what you have done." The galaxy rebuilt itself in the years that followed, the Council species and humanity working together to create a civilization that honored the legacy of the architects. The darkness had been defeated, but the memory of it remained. A reminder that survival required sacrifice, that hope required courage, and that humanity was the species that would never give up. Because that was their purpose, that was their power, and that was their gift to the galaxy. The end.